Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. Today, as you can see from the map, I'm going to talk about the Israeli crisis. I really wanted to have Google Earth up, but it's taken a little activity. I really got to say that I'm very happy with all the folks over here at Access Tucson. They've really been helping, trying to motivate this to get the Google Earth up, but we weren't able to do that this week. So my original plan was to roll Google Earth and focus in on the Lebanese-Israeli border and just do all this really kind of low-tech, high-tech stuff. It is high-tech because there's a satellite up there that's creating an entire picture of the Earth. You can focus in all the way into the buildings, and I've done that at home, and show what is this war zone, where is this place, what is going on, and so on and so forth. But that didn't quite get pulled together. Maybe next week. Hopefully there won't be a Middle East crisis next week. Let me just say that for me, it's Friday, the 28th of July. You're not going to see this until Sunday or Tuesday. So everything I talk about is going to be extremely out of date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about some context. Who are these people? Where do they come from? Why are they fighting? And where is it leading to? Now, as far as the old news, because this news, anything I talk about is going to be 3 days old, the big news of the last couple days has been a big battle at Bint Jebel, and I'm going to use my magic thing to find Bint Jebel. It's right there. And it's about 4 kilometers north of the Israeli border. There's a tremendous battle, which the Israelis won. And then the next day, the Hezbollah were able to get another 100, 150 to 200 troops in there. Now, the original estimates were that there's 5,000 approximately actual fighters, Hezbollah full-time guerrillas, kind of their special forces or their ninjas, whatever you want to call them, all prepared to die, suicide bomber ready, just ready to roll. Who is Hezbollah? Hezbollah is a Shiite religious party and what they call a resistance group. By resistance group, we mean a guerrilla group. We mean a guerrilla army. So the little catchphrase resistance just means I'm fighting people I don't like. To us, we call them a terrorist group because they're willing to kill anybody and blow themselves up and commit suicide to kill others. Hezbollah are the folks that killed the 240 Marines in a suicide car bomb attack, probably the first that I know of in history. In 1983, they blew up the Marine barracks in Beirut during the first Lebanese war. This is the second one, started on July 12th, and Hezbollah came down, killed 8 Israeli troops, on the Israeli border. There's Haifa. The Israeli border goes like this and then goes up. But it was about there. They took out an Israeli post that was right on the border. They apparently may have had dug a tunnel under it, surprised the troops, killed 8, and captured 2. And that's what started this particular round of crisis. But who Hezbollah are, Lebanon is a country that just came out of a civil war. Well, not just, but had a terrible civil war from 1975 to 2000, or to 1990. It was 15 years long. And they have a lot of different ethnic and religious groups. So Lebanon is about 40% Christian. Some people say only 35%, 5% Druze. And Druze are another little bitty Shiite group that don't agree with the Iranians. I believe in the 12th Imam is the Messiah. And they're a small group, but they're very tough fighters, and they're kind of in the middle. And then there's the Sunnis. There's about 20% Sunnis. Throughout history, the Christians dominated during the French period, but before that, the Sunnis have always dominated. They're very, very cosmopolitan people, excellent businessmen, great bankers, really good at the tourist industry, and their entire country was destroyed in 15 years of civil war between the various groups. Now, the last group are Shiites. Anybody who's watched this show, I've gone through my little rap about what is a Sunni Muslim, what is a Shiite Muslim. Islam was started by Muhammad, and Muhammad was the one and only prophet. And unlike Jesus or the other religions or Buddha, Muhammad actually had a child. His wife was Khadija and his daughter was Fatima. Fatima married a guy named Ali, who I believe was a member of one of the upper class Arab families. And however, he didn't take over for Muhammad. Instead, Muhammad's general, I believe it was Abu Bakr, there was Abu Bakr and then Omar, two generals shared power, one took it and then the other. And they were the successors. Caliph means successor. They built a tremendous empire from the borders of Pakistan all the way to Egypt, which was eventually got even bigger and spread all the way to Morocco and to Spain. So this gigantic empire was created within 40, 50 years, at least the first round, all the way to Libya. So after the two successors, after these two generals, wonderful generals that really expanded where Islam was, the next caliph, the next successor was Muhammad's son-in-law. His name was Ali. And Ali basically is the beginning of the Shiites. He was overthrown, he was murdered or martyred by the Umayyad dynasty, and Umas, I believe, was the next caliph. He started his own dynasty that lasted about 100, 150 years. Very, very powerful. Now, his son, the grandson of Muhammad, was Hussein. And Hussein was lured to go from Saudi Arabia, which was basically the original capital. Damascus soon replaced it as the capital, a little more civilized, I guess. And he was brought to Iraq, where there was a group that said, we will follow you, and we think that you should be the next caliph, and we'll overthrow the Umayyads. He went there with about 500 troops. He was surrounded by the Umayyads, who had trapped him near Karbala, and that's why in Iraq today are the holy cities of Karbala and An-Najaf, one to Ali, and the other one is the tomb of Hussein. And that's the beginning of the Shiite Islamic religion. So they believe that it is the line of Muhammad that counts. The Sunnis believe that everybody has a personal relation to God, and there are imams, which I guess are people that are that call you, or teachers, or prayer calls, who you listen to, but are not holy in any way. They can be holy, but they're not prophets or in the sense that Muhammad was. Now, the Shiites believe that the people in the line of Muhammad, in every generation, there is another holy imam who is the equivalent and is a prophet in his own right. So each one of these could actually write their own Quran and believe something else. So that's the Shiite religion, and the Shiite religion has a formal clergy, almost like a priesthood, with ayatollahs and hierarchy and so on and so forth, where the Sunnis, whoever really is considered holy or learned or so on and so forth, can become a prayer leader of a mosque, and he can go up in status or rank. So those are the big differences in the Shiites and the Sunnis. For instance, Iran, under Ahmadinejad, a lot of people have heard about him. He's the guy The president of Iran, who's called for the destruction of Israel and said America is a paper tiger, who knows what else. He is in a Shiite country. And that is a country where he is not really the leader, he's only the president. It's almost like a figurehead. And the real leader is the head of the Guardians Council, who is an Ayatollah of the Shiite religion. Well, the Hezbollah, they have their own Ayatollah. His name is Nasrallah. And Nasrallah is the guy who's kind of behind this whole war. So over here on the border, now I'm going to point again between Lebanon and Israel. So it goes up. I have to get my directions right. It's a real art because I'm looking at a TV that's in front of me, and it's really mirror image. So it's my right hand or my left hand that's showing where the map is. And that, of course, is an art that especially TV weathermen have down. So I'm going to point at it. And they came across on July 12th, and they took prisoners. Now, there's a lot of context on the Israeli side. So let me just finish on who Hezbollah is. Hezbollah started during this first Gulf War. They've been supported by Iran. In about 1990, this guy Nasrallah took it over, and he fought the Israelis until the Israelis left northern Lebanon in the year 2000. Why did they leave? Well, the Israelis had a prime minister at the time. His name was Barak. He was a real peace searcher. He is also the guy who tried to make the second Camp David agreement with Clinton. And he felt that Israel didn't need to take casualties in what it was to him a foreign country of Lebanon. They didn't need the buffer zone that they had created during the first Lebanese war. And that he would just pull out, which he did, to a line that was set by the UN. That's called the blue line. And the blue line on a UN map is an actual border between countries' official border, where a green line, which is what they talk about between the Palestinians and Israel, that is an armistice line that's recognized as where the fighting ends, as opposed to the blue line, which recognizes where an actual country ends or begins. So they pulled back to the blue line, but instead of putting a Lebanese army on the border to police the border, the Lebanese were very, very weak at the time, and they were pretty much under the control of Syria, who won the Lebanese Civil War and occupied Lebanon, controlled its government. So they said, we are not here to defend Israel, an enemy's country, border. So Hezbollah came down all the way to the border and set up shop along this border. And there were a number of instances. The worst is in, there was one in 1996, there was one in 2002, where Hezbollah, when they took over, started to lob these Katyusha rockets. Katyusha is actually a Russian word. They're Russian originated or Russian designed, but they're made all over the Middle East. The Iranians have them, the Syrians have them, probably, for all we know, the Lebanese have them as well. But they're launchable, but they're not aimable. They don't have little guidance systems in. They don't have little motors. You just set them off, and they're like the rockets that kids play with. They just go up, and depending on the trajectory, they go down based on physics. But they're not really aimable. So there were a couple times when they either took Israeli prisoners, which they did in 2001, and they actually killed 3 Israelis, took another prisoner in 2005, kind of lured a guy who was a little bit shady into Lebanon and captured him. And in 2005, which may have actually encouraged Hezbollah, the Israelis, in order to get 3 bodies back and 1 live person who wasn't even a soldier, exchanged him for, I think, at least 1,200 Lebanese prisoners. What did this do? Well, this indicated that no matter what Hezbollah did, they could, put their thumb in Israel's eye, and Israel would do little pinpoint counterattack, maybe blow up a car with some guerrillas in it. But they really wouldn't counterattack. They didn't want to mess with Israel or with Lebanon. So they just came to the conclusion that Israel was a paper tiger. And of course, in 2005, also, Israel pulled out of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, not the West Bank. And when they pulled out of the Gaza Strip, the Israelis took all their settlers along with it and all the soldiers, although they did keep control over the ports, shut down the airport, and so on and so forth, and the exits. So it looked like the Israelis were on the run. It looked like they were pulling out of things. Sooner or later, they were weak, so on and so forth. So originally, about a week before that, the Palestinians had dug a hole under the Gaza Strip and had killed 2 Israelis and took 1 prisoner, who may or may not be dead for all we know. Nobody's seen him. And then Hezbollah, and there was an outcry and a hue and cry, and Israel was all humiliated and angry over it. So the Hezbollahs figured, well, they'll do the same thing. What they didn't realize is that Israel has its own context. They have a new prime minister named Ehud Olmert, and he is head of a new party. And during the election season, the head of this new party called Kadima, which means forward in Hebrew, who's Ariel Sharon. He's the guy who pulled out of the Gaza Strip. But he's also a general who had won many, many battles in previous wars, including the key battle in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. He was a great general. So he had a stroke and is now in a coma. So this fellow, his deputy, Ehud Olmert, who had never actually been in a war. He had been in the army, he was a reporter, but he had never been in a war. He wasn't a general, he wasn't a great fighter, he didn't have a great reputation. He was a pretty good politician, that's about it. At one point or another, I believe he was the mayor of Jerusalem. That's about all he had ever done before he became deputy prime minister to Sharon. So he wanted to create what they called a convergence. And the convergence was a voluntary pulling out of settlers beyond a barrier in the West Bank, which keeps the Palestinian suicide bombers from Israel proper. And he was going to pull these settlers out, and then if he couldn't get anybody to agree with him that that was going to be the new border, he was going to declare it unilaterally the new border. But the result was that already 1.4 million Palestinians were in an area without Israeli troops and without Israeli settlers. There'd be another 1.8 million. So pretty much, if this convergence had occurred, a rump or a beginning Palestinian state alongside Israel could have been created. And he had a consensus for it. But as this election went on, of course, the Palestinians had decided to shoot these Qassam rockets, which aren't as good as Katyushas, over the border of Gaza. So the Israeli consensus had said, oh, let's pull out more. Let's get rid of a lot of these settlers. These settlers are just irritating everybody. Let's pull them back to this barrier or wall or whatever you want to call it. And let's let the Palestinians be Palestinians and we'll be Israelis, and we will be a permanent majority behind this line. And they would be. Behind that line were about 150,000 or 180,000 Palestinians, 450,000 Jews. So you would have ended up with a country about 7 million people, of which 5.6 or 5.7 million would be Jewish and the rest would be Arab. So, but it would be a tremendous majority. Whereas if Israel and Palestine combined into one country, whether it was Israel or whether the Palestinians destroyed Israel, what you would have would be about 5 million Palestinians, 5.6 million Israelis, and eventually the Palestinians have a lot more babies than the Israelis do. Eventually the Palestinians would have a majority, and they would just vote Israel out of existence. At least that's the theory. So it's called the demographic problem in Israel. So the Israelis were worried about that. So there was a consensus for Israel to start pulling out. And this was the worst thing in the world for the Hamas, which is the Palestinian radicals, and for Hezbollah, because what it would do, it would have turned the argument into a border dispute. And to be honest with you, none of the Arab world, none of the Europeans, none of the people that support the Palestinians really care much about what their border is or how much they get or what they don't get. What they really care about is that the Palestinians have no country at all at present. And that's what they want to solve. They want a Palestinian state alongside an Israeli state, state with a majority of Jews, a state with a majority of Arabs, in fact, no Jews at all. And that's basically what the world community wants. So how did this lead to that? So the Palestinians, they got themselves an Israeli soldier that they thought they were going to exchange for 10,000 prisoners. So Hezbollah had to do one better. They killed 8 soldiers and got 2 prisoners, but they underestimated the internal situation in Israel, because the internal situation in Israel is that the Israelis were getting more and more upset about this convergence. They thought that a lot of Israelis thought that if the Israelis pulled back from the West Bank, that the Palestinians would just start shooting rockets at Tel Aviv, which is the biggest city, at the coast. I'm going to point at this coast over here. It's very, very, trying to get my angle right. It's very, very narrow coast over there. And that area has about the majority of the Israeli people. And of course, Jerusalem itself, which is this dark spot right over there that I managed to successfully point at, which is Israel's second biggest city, and of course the most holy city that all 3 religions care so much about. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that if the Israelis do that, if they're allowed to do that, especially if they don't make an agreement, then first of all, the Palestinians have gotten something for nothing, and a lot for nothing, a state for nothing. And the radicals can't stand that. And that's what the Israelis were going to give them. But now that there's been this battle over here, and Hezbollah took these prisoners, Ehud Olmert was looking very, very weak. He was probably going to get a no-confidence vote. The consensus for this convergence or this pullback or this getting rid of settlers out of parts of the West Bank had collapsed. And basically, unless he looked a lot tougher, he was going to lose power anyway. So he went in there with guns blazing. He bombed the Beirut airport. He bombed the Hezbollah suburb in southern Lebanon. He bombed out almost every bridge in Lebanon so that the Syrians couldn't bring resupply of new missiles down to Hezbollah. But Hezbollah had already collected 10 to 13,000, nobody knows exactly how many, of these Katyusha rockets. And they had gotten rockets that were even stronger than Katyusha rockets that could hit Haifa. Okay, now I'm going to do this again. Now you see this little bump up here on the coast of Israel? That's Haifa. I've actually been there. And it's just a beautiful coastal town, and that's where their technical university is. And that's one of the few towns, ironically, that has both Arabs and Jews who live together, and also is the holy place for another small religion called the Baha'is, who are actually from Iran. Don't tell me exactly why, but that's their holy spot. So Haifa, I'm going to point at it again, there it is, right there, is actually reachable by these what they call Fajr 3 or extended Katyusha rockets, which the Hezbollah has been shooting left and right. So when this thing started, the Israelis started bombing all around Lebanon. Immediately, about 250 Lebanese were killed, mostly civilians. And then the second phase of the war happened. And in the second phase of the war, the Israelis were going to push back the Hezbollah. And there was this big battle in Bet Jabal where the Israelis took the town, and then the Hezbollah snuck back in. They have these network of tunnels, and then killed 8 Israelis, 1 in the other town of Ras Mansour. And the Israelis didn't look as tough as they might. My name is Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride. reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. And I guess that I will talk about this more next week if it's still an issue. Thank you very much.